Driver's Ed, Chapter 4, page 55. So, said Mac, was it Nicholas or Morgan we were trying to impress? Why couldn't Mac move away or join the army? Remy needed the house to herself so she could sing love songs at the top of her lungs and laugh wildly and dance on the ceiling. What were you guys doing tonight? Said Mac suspiciously. She missed a beat, but her brother couldn't have seen her tuck Morgan Road behind the bushes by the front door, or he'd have collected the sign already. He'd be waving it in the air and yelling for Mom and Dad to come see what their darling daughter had done. She could not keep the wildly happy smile off her face and had to pirouette away from her brother, hiding the joy behind cupped hands. Mac circled her as she danced, squinting into her eyes to gather more facts. Since when have you gone to Lark School on a school night to see movies? You lied. Where'd you really go, Remy? Out! She hung on to the voice that wanted to sing. Sing. Chorus. Mr. Willett. Love songs, air kisses, and air hugs. Yes, it was all true. Love wasn't just for other people or the final chapters of paperbacks. It was there, and it happened, and it was happening to Remy Marland. She and Morgan wouldn't have to settle for air kisses now. Mac made a big deal of studying his watch. 10:25 p.m. on a school night, and you were just out? I'm usually the one who lies, Remy. She wanted to open all the kitchen cabinets and slam the doors in rhythm, dance on the countertop, whack a few pots with wooden spoons like her baby brother. Morgan likes me. Go lick the parakeet cage liner, she said to Mac. Aha! Said Mac. I'm on to something here. Before Mac could continue his interrogation, Mom and Dad joined them in the kitchen. The Marlin family was snack happy. They had more junk food in their cupboards than anybody else in town. Remy had no idea why she was still thin, but certainly her mother was no longer thin. Hello, darling, said her mother, hugging and then standing back to admire her daughter. Did you have fun? She nodded approval over the earrings Remy had chosen. Remy's mother approved of everything about her. She told Remy constantly that she was the most beautiful, brilliant, talented, wonderful, interesting girl in America. Remy had actually believed this until junior high, when the important girls made it clear that she was not. Now I'm important. Morgan's gone on me. You are so beautiful tonight, said her mother. I must be. Morgan would never be interested in a girl who isn't. She's also in love, said Mac. Morgan or Nicholas won. Morgan Campbell? Repeated Dad, grinning. Remy, you told me you would never fall for anybody from Sunday school. Then it must be Nicky Buddy, said Mac. Nicholas, corrected Remy, her cheeks flaming. I don't even like Nicholas. He's a scummy dreck. It's Morgan, then, said Mac. I knew that. Anyway, I was just testing you. I saw how you've written Remy Marlin Campbell on your notepaper, pretending you're a bride, and that's your new name. Mom clapped her hands. Oh, I adore Morgan. He's been a hunk since first grade, and I'm very fond of his parents. I wouldn't mind having them as in-laws. Mom, stop it. I haven't even had a date with him yet. I'm telling Morgan, said Mac. He needs to know Mom has pre-qualified him. He can get on with the wedding plans now. Remy tried to cripple her brother with a well-placed kick, but Dad grabbed her to stop a full-scale fight. Rafe is going to run, did you hear? He said. I might work on his campaign. I haven't felt good about a candidate in years. If Mr. Campbell wins, Mac pointed out, Morgan'll move. That was a year off. Remy had tomorrow to think of first. Concert choir fantasy aside, what would Morgan say to her in school? Tomorrow was Friday. A very important fact. He'd want to go out this weekend, wouldn't he? After those kisses, wouldn't he want to see her right away? He couldn't stand it, could he? Mac interpreted every expression on her face. I have several hundred important calls to make, he said. The phone will never be free. Morgan avoided his family easily. Each of them had a private phone line, and they were all on the phone. When I take my sign, thought Morgan, I'll keep it in the basement. He went down to the basement where he kept his free weights. He peeled off his shirt and cords and got right to work, getting rid of the screaming energy collected in his muscles. Only Morgan ever went into the basement. His parents were not basement people. They did not fix things. They paid others to do that. They did not know where their fuse box was, or how the furnace ran, or where the shut-off valves were. Dad owned few tools and kept those in the garage. Mom had bought this house partly because each bedroom had its own bath with washer-dryer. No laundry room at all, let alone one in the basement. He worked out, then moved over to the rowing machine until sweat ran satisfyingly down his body. Thank God for weights. Morgan never argued. His sister Star, now, she was a champion arguer. But Morgan could never think of anything to say. He always just wanted to leave the room. The thought was not a mild, maybe I'll leave the room. It was a seething, roiling energy that began in his legs, demanding laps around a track. Words did not form. Speech did not come. Instead, every muscle in his body kicked in, shouting for exercise. When other people could argue, Morgan needed to hit punching bags. It had been a great night. There had been no real danger in his life for a long time. He wanted more of it. He laughed at himself, like taking a sign equals danger, he thought ruefully. He picked up his clothes from the cellar floor, went up 2 flights, and stuffed them in his washing machine. He had so much crammed in there now there wasn't room for water. The sleeve of his sweater wouldn't go in. He wondered what it would be like under Remy's sweater. By morning, Remy was rehearsed for anything. She was prepared to be ignored totally in case Morgan had changed his mind or never had his mind the way she wanted it. In case Morgan was wholly involved with Chase and Taft on some dumb subject like pro football and never looked her way. If that happened, she had to get through it without a change of expression, never mind desperate sobbing or crazed pleading. On the other hand, she was ready to be asked out in front of the whole class, to be kissed and hugged in public. If that happened, she also had to act normal, like, of course, this was usual for her. She ran her mind over the schedule of the day, and that portion she shared with Morgan Campbell. Driver's ed. Mr. Fielding could not possibly take the same 3 kids driving 3 days in a row. Even Mr. Fielding would notice a certain repetition among faces, so she and Morgan would stay in the library. Would they acknowledge each other? Would they allow the world to catch a glimpse of what had passed between them last night? Would they allow themselves to admit it? Morgan Campbell woke up in the morning feeling like a rag doll with button eyes. Never mind weightlifting and rowing. He had to handle having a crush on a girl, and he had to do it in front of people. The whole idea made him limp. In concert choir, Morgan's eyes were so stuck to the music page there might have been magnets involved. In driver's ed, he walked blindly next to Chase and hid behind Taft like a toddler behind his mother. He didn't look Remy's way. He didn't talk to her. He didn't wave. He was so practiced at ignoring his parents and staying silent next to them that it was relatively easy to ignore Remy and stay silent next to her. How will she know I want to do it again, he thought, if I ignore her? He went on ignoring her. Actually, ignore was hardly the word. Except for Remy, Morgan was hardly even conscious. She was the world, and yet there he was, focusing on ceiling cracks and linoleum splits. Error, he thought, the word flickering in his mind the way it did on computer screens. This was a game of chicken in which he was the chicken, and if he didn't get brave, he'd be a loser forever. He didn't get brave. He just tightened in on himself as if he were a fortress in need of defense. He skipped current events. The stress of another class with Remy was too much. JV games began at 4:30. Girls of Remy's grade and playing level had usually given up by now. Remy didn't have good hands or a feel for movement and strategy. She often wondered why she stuck with basketball. But sitting on the bench, toes pressed down hard inside her thick sneakers, she would yearn to play. You never knew whether the coach would put you in. His rotations were based on something Remy did not understand, in which the parents said grumpily was called favoritism. It was clear that Morgan Campbell was sorry he had ever gotten near her. By the light of day, he must have realized Remy did not possess the perfection he required. Morgan was probably even now fantasizing about Alexandra. Remy wanted to go home and cry, cry for hours, cry for years. She was stuck with the basketball schedule and must play against Central. She made herself think of other things. Socks. Who yanked them up and who scrunched them down? Hair. Whose fell out of the ponytail and whose bangs were sweaty wet? Remy, bellowed the coach, pay attention. This is basketball. As if she'd been playing soccer. A teacher paused carelessly in the door, his timing stating clearly that JV games were worth no more. Remy's father loaded down with video cam and baby brother, and her mother burdened with diapers, snack, bottle, toys, juice, and blanket trooped in. Mom shouted hello to other parents, kissed little brothers and sisters, greeted older brothers and sisters, noticed who had grown and who'd had haircuts and who was wearing new shoes. Remy, this is basketball. Remy forced herself back into the game. Morgan and Lark walked into the gym and climbed the bleachers to the top. Morgan, like any boy, never had been, never would be, at a girls' JV game. Morgan, however, was at a girls' JV game. Right away there was a call against Remy. Are you blind? Her father screamed. His hobby was helping the ref. In the first quarter he still had a clean mouth. What are you, a shoe salesman? You got two eyes? Remy's teammates looked at her long and sadly. Their fathers had clean mouths. Their fathers did not embarrass the entire team in school. Their father sat next to Remy's, though, and egged him on. If Remy's team was ahead, Dad was sometimes able to remain calm. If they were getting shellacked, Dad would kick the bleachers and shout things about the ref's family background. Frequently, Dad informed the ref that his brain was located in another part of his body. Not in front of Morgan, Remy prayed. Come on, God, do your thing. Keep Dad's mouth shut. Let me make a basket. Let Morgan be here with Lark because Morgan arranged it, not because Lark did. Lark and Morgan sat beneath a huge banner made by the cheerleaders proclaiming, We will crush you. Lark was happy. She had been asked, she knew, in the role of escort to make it possible for Morgan to attend. If he came alone, he would be obvious, but if he wandered in with Remy's girlfriend, Lark, nobody would think anything of it. It was important when you were getting interested in a girl that nobody should be able to tell. Of course, every girl could always tell, but the boys thought they were being crafty and invisible. Mr. Marlin whistled with two fingers in his mouth. He sounded like a freight train ripping through the building. Lark did not know how her parents would behave in public. They never came to anything, even teacher conferences. They had basically skipped Lark's life. She didn't mind. She had made her own. And her own game involved looking out for herself, since nobody else was doing it. Nicky Buddy's voice, when he called Thursday afternoon to arrange a pickup time, had been a warning signal. He was a future criminal of America, if there ever was one, and what had seemed like an amusing adventure suddenly sounded tricky. Thickly settled was nice, but not getting caught was nicer. Lark hoped Remy would play well in front of Morgan, although Remy didn't play well in front of anybody else, so why should she rise to this occasion? Rumor had it once the season started, Remy wouldn't be kept on junior varsity, a form of humiliation few suffered. Lark herself competed only in sports without spectators. Never in this world would Lark be a fool in front of a crowd. Field hockey and softball were okay because nobody ever came. Basketball was different. By the third quarter, and definitely the fourth, the gym would begin to fill. People arriving for varsity would want to see how the younger girls were doing, what their potential was. She glanced at Morgan. Yes, definitely a boy deciding what the potential was. Blue ball! The ref shouted. A blind man can see it's white, bellowed Mr. Marland. Morgan loved the Marlins. They were so obvious. What you saw was what you got. You could see Mrs. Marlin across the gym and know that her first name was Imogene, and she was a receptionist in a pediatric practice. You could listen to Mr. Marlin and know that he would always believe in his daughter's abilities, whether she had any or not. Plus, whenever you watched the Marlins, you were always glad you had different parents. Remy was fouled, 1-1. Morgan prayed for her. Let her make them both. She sank the first one. In games, you could always yell for the player, so Morgan was free to yell, and he yelled, "Way to go, Remy!" She bounced the ball 4 times, trying to drain off tension. I'll ask her out after the game, he thought. I'll tell her I was an idiot for not talking to her during class. He knew he would do neither one. Okay, then, I'll call her tonight, he thought. That was far enough off that he could believe he might really do it. Morgan was not in the gym when Remy and her team got out of the locker room. Morgan was not at Pizza Hut to celebrate the JV victory. Morgan had left no messages with Lark. And that night, though Remy waited and circled and prayed, the phone did not ring. What was the point in having a God if he did not make the phone ring when you wanted it to? Friday night, and the phone was not ringing. She had a sick glance down the hallways of her life, a horror that all of her Friday nights would be phoneless. No, God, she said forcefully, anything but that. Saturday would come and go, filled with the chores of a working family. Groceries, laundry, vacuuming, a rented movie to fill the evening. Sunday would arrive, and here she was, irked with God. Why could the Marlins never skip church like normal people? When she was little, Remy loved church. It was so mysterious. Why had everybody come? Why were they dressed up? Why did they serve such strange food? Why did you pay for this, hiding your money in little white envelopes? By her teens, however, Remy detested church. It was not mysterious. It was dumb. Everybody was a hypocrite. There was no point, and when she had children of her own, she would not subject them to this. Her kids would play on soccer teams with Sunday morning games. So there. Thinking of Mrs. Willett's awful sermons made her think of Mr. Willett, nominating Morgan for normalcy. If Morgan were normal, she thought, he would have stayed after the game and asked me out. Let's quit going to church, Remy said to her brother. Will you quit with me? Matt could not stand being on his sister's side, so even if he detested church 90 times more than Remy, which he did, he couldn't agree with her. Of course not, he said. Do you think I want to hurt Mom? He continued to drink out of the orange juice carton, letting it dribble down his chin and spill on the floor where Remy would step in it. She was sick of this. She wanted to make a dent in the world. If Morgan Campbell wouldn't call, something else would have to happen. Like a watchman in a city of old, Morgan's mother called out, 11 o'clock approaching. In some families, the warning meant bedtime. In Morgan Campbell's, it meant the late news. Rafe and Nance Campbell and their son and daughter gathered before the televisions. Dad channel grazed, remoting at high speed from station to station. Stalking Lions on PBS blended into diamond rings on Home Shopper, evaporating into wrestling matches on ESPN, only to dissolve into rock stars on MTV. This is the kind of dangerous light pattern that sets off convulsions in small children, Daddy, said Star. Dad grinned and stopped. He left the sound on for the local ABC News affiliate, their usual favorite. Morgan liked the late-night commentators. He knew them as well as any family friend. Anne was slender, graceful, and utterly lovely. Rob was thick, stern, and heavy-lidded. Sports were handled by Chuck, who grinned steadily. He knew he had the best job on earth. Weather was Irene, a confused middle-aged woman who worried so much about the possibility of snow that Morgan assumed she had no life and spent her existence staring at weather patterns and feeling desperate. And now a new dimension to vandalism in our city, said Anne, smoothing her papers and looking kind and sweet. Anne's hair was neither blonde nor gray, but truly silver, as if she had come off a starship. The smashing of mailboxes is well known to us. There have been 5 sieges in this destruction since the opening of city schools on September 2nd. Star moaned. Tell us how kids today are responsible for everything, she said to Anne. 11:10, thought Morgan. Too late to call Remy now. The weekend is shot, and now Remy'll be mad at me, and by Monday she'll hate me. He tried to reconstruct the feeling of her lips and hair, but he seemed to have no touch memory. To know it again, he would have to do it again. His mouth was dry. And now a spate of sign stealing has hit the suburban areas with terrible results. Anne looked gravely into Morgan's eyes. Sign stealing? What terrible results? That sounded like media hype to Morgan. How could there be terrible results from taking a street name? He was not nervous exactly. He was a plane that was not landing, waiting for permission to come down, holding pattern tense. Last night, said Anne, a fatal car accident occurred at the corner of Warren Street and Cherry Road. His mother passed a wicker basket filled with skinny stick pretzels, star-made pretzel stick people on the coffee table. The camera panned over the intersection Morgan had left 24 hours earlier. His mouth got drier, and then his eyes dried too, as if he were evaporating. A car driven by 26-year-old Denise Thompson was hit broadside by a truck. Denise Thompson was killed instantly. Police say this is a particularly dangerous intersection. There is supposed to be a stop sign on Cherry Road, but when Mrs. Thompson, driving home after dropping her babysitter off, came to the intersection with Warren Street, there was no stop sign. The camera slipped slowly over a blue car so completely crushed by a Mason's dump truck that Morgan could not tell if it was a sedan or a wagon, old or new, American or foreign. The front door had been cut off to extricate the driver. The opening bore no resemblance to the door's shape. It was a twisted cave. Today, police tried to reconstruct the incident, said Anne, and now on television the wrecked car was gone. Towed away, traffic flowed on Warren, life except Denise Thompson's went on. Morgan was screaming on the inside. It was soundless, yet so loud that jet engines might have been taking off in his brain. There is supposed to be a stop sign on Cherry Road. A reporter on the scene addressed a policeman. Do you have any idea who did this? Kids, said the cop, shrugging. He had seen it before, he would see it again. They don't think. They like the shape of stop signs, you know. We have to replace them all the time. Kids probably figure whoever's driving here will figure it out. You know, stop whether the sign's there or not. Kids don't stop to think. They forget that eventually it's the middle of the night. No traffic, no clues. This Denise Thompson, she's a stranger to the road. She needs that stop sign. The stop sign that stood on its side in Morgan's garage. His veins and arteries were expanding as if he were going to explode. When do you think the sign was taken? Asked the reporter. Neighbor said it was here when she got home from shopping around 9, said the cop. Accident happened 10:18. Cut on the post is fresh. You can see the contrast right here. The camera zeroed in. The slice that Morgan had made with Nicky's hacksaw glittered clean and metallic at the top of the grimy post. No, thought Morgan. That didn't happen. It was just a sign. We weren't doing anything. It was just a sign. A weeping man, face so distorted by pain it was impossible to tell what he really looked like, swatted away the microphone. Even so, it picked up his screams. My wife is dead, he shouted. We have a 2-year-old. He's lost his mother. All because some goddamn kid thought it was fun to take a stop sign. Some goddamn kid. Morgan's mind burned. His heart seemed to catch fire. He was so hot and dry he felt blistered. He wanted to look at his skin but could not take his eyes off the screen. Nobody died, he thought. Not because of me. I'm a nice person. It was only a sign. The husband was opening his wallet, ripping it apart, throwing useless things like credit cards and $20 bills to the ground. He yanked out a photograph and held it up to the camera. His hand was shaking. The reporter steadied the picture for his crew. A pretty young woman, brown hair falling into her eyes, was stretching her hands out to a tottering child. Her smile was complete. You knew that at that moment her world had been complete too, full of love and rejoicing, and a perfect, healthy baby. Denise Thompson, said Anne, leaves her husband Mark and a 2-year-old son Bobby. No. Anybody with information about this act of vandalism, which led to an innocent woman's death, said Anne invisibly, should telephone police at the phone number seen on your screen. Denise Thompson's husband looked both wild and helpless, out of control, yet too weak to move. Suddenly, he wanted the microphone, and he seized it, paying no attention to reporter or cameraman. If I find the kid that took the sign, he wiped his eyes with the hand that held the mic. If I find out who murdered my wife, who left our son without his mother. Mark Thompson did not finish his threat. He stared past the cameras and into his future. He seemed to fold and become smaller. After a while, he let go of the mic and stumbled away. The camera followed him silently. The police phone number stayed on the screen. The number seemed to memorize itself, began playing in his head like lyrics to a song. Morgan looked away from the television, but of course the room was full of televisions. 3 more of them, their blank gray screens like coffins. If he turned them on, they too would speak of stolen signs and dead mothers. It was just a sign, he thought. Everybody does it. It doesn't count. It's whoever took that sign, said Rafe Campbell, should be shot.